Hi everybody. My name is Danya Murali, and I work at Arcadia Power. And we are a sponsor of this conference, and you probably have been hearing us a whole bunch and wondering who we are, so I'm excited to tell you guys who we are. But before I start, I want to tell you another story of how I got this job. So last year, I was sitting at this conference in the audience, like all you all, and this guy, Max Richmond, who's actually sitting right over there, came up and gave a talk. And at the time, I was sitting in the audience, and I was in a place of transition. I had just finished graduate school. I had been working at the Department of Energy for 3 years, and at the Department of Energy, I was forecasting US crude oil production using SAS. And so at this time, I kind of wanted to have a different job, and there were two things that I really wanted in my next job. One, in grad school, I had learned that R is amazing, so I really wanted to be able to do analysis in R. And two, I wanted to not work in oil and work in renewables. And so Max comes up, starts giving this talk about this cool company called Arcadia Power, and starts telling us all about how he actually uses SQL. He didn't really talk about R. But he threw R into it a little bit, and I just assumed that they use R. And I was like, wow, I want that job. So just like Jared's been telling all of you guys, if you go and say hi to someone, I don't know, you might end up having a job. So here I am, a year later. I work at Arcadia Power. I love my job, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys about renewables, reproducibility, and RMarkdown. Let's jump in. After that warm and fuzzy introduction, let's talk about climate change. So this is how I feel about climate change. It's fine. It's great. So I think one of the issues that I personally have with climate change is that it's this huge existential crisis. It's like doom and destruction is coming to get you, and all of us as individuals, it feels like there's not very much that we can do to resolve it. Sort of how Elizabeth earlier talked about you can reduce your meat consumption, so that's one thing. But when it comes to your electricity, we are a society that depends on electricity. We have to use electricity, and unfortunately, most of our electricity currently is sourced from fossil fuels, which are putting carbon and methane and all these wonderful things into the atmosphere, and it's eventually going to have us all die, and that sucks. And so it sucks. It feels like you don't have a lot of agency over this huge issue. So that's something that Arcadia Power is trying to resolve. So we are kind of in the business of giving people agency over their electricity powered decisions. So we do this by giving you access to clean energy. And we do this through matching your usage to renewable energy credits, also known as RECs. And we believe that choosing clean energy shouldn't be something that causes you to have to pay more money. It shouldn't be a premium thing. It should be something that everyone should have access to. So with that ethos, we match 50% of your usage to renewable energy credits completely for free. And then to get to 100%, we have a small premium. And that's one thing. Another way that we help give access of clean energy to people is through a community solar program. And we do that. The community solar program is important because a lot of people, I'm sure we would all love to have solar panels on our roof, but the reality is they're very expensive, and a lot of times we are renters or we live in places where the sun doesn't exactly shine in the right part of our house to be able to put a solar panel there. And so instead, to get access to solar energy, you can get access to community solar projects through virtual net metering. And so and also by doing that, you can lower your energy bill by getting credits back on your bill for what those solar farms produce. So we give access to customers through that completely for free. And then the third thing that we do, which is not strictly about clean energy, but it falls under the idea of clean energy shouldn't be something that's more expensive, is we have a smart rate program. And with our smart rate program in deregulated states, so most of the Northeast, where you have the option to choose your energy supplier, we kind of work as a broker to help you find the lowest rates to your energy, so you can lower your power bill and also try and get clean energy. So it's a cool business. It's a cool software. We're sort of like in this weird in-between place where we're not a utility company. We're like a tech company, but we're like trying to like solve this big like energy problem, and it's super easy. You can sign up in 2 minutes. That's my plug. Moving on. So I work on the analytics and data science team at Arcadia Power. And our team has 4 main roles. We do a lot of the operation support, so that's like supporting the product team and the marketing team and like kind of any of the operational teams and making sure they have all of the data access and data needs met to run the business. We do a lot of business analytics for keeping track of things like attrition and I don't know, like how many recs people have bought and just big picture business things. And then we do a lot of market research, and so that's something that I personally work in quite a bit. The energy industry is like this huge thing. Like when people talk about the grid, it's like, ooh, what is the grid? It's like this big thing. And so we spend a lot of time trying to understand the energy industry and understand where we fit and where the need is and how we can meet that need. And so along that, we also do a lot of prototyping of different products and new products before they're put into production to make sure that we're meeting the right customers and getting them the things they need. So we do this using a variety of tools. Some of them are right here. So we do a lot of our data warehousing is done in Amazon Redshift and PostgreSQL. We use Tableau for a lot of business analytics. I would love that to be like R. Maybe one day we'll get there. I don't know. Unfortunately, you can't ever escape Excel, so we do use a little Excel. And then we also use, especially for a lot of the market research stuff, we use a lot of R and a lot of RStudio. And so the reason I bring this up is as a data scientist and someone that works on a data science team, having a workflow or a set of analysis that's reproducible is something that we really care about. So what is reproducibility? When I think about reproducibility, I think about it in 3 different perspectives. So the first one is the philosophical perspective, and this is something that I think we all talk about. It's like the idea of finding the ground truth in your respective fields and whatever you're trying to do. Like the scientific method is kind of based on this like philosophical idea of reproducibility. So that's great. We should aim for that. But something I think we don't talk about enough is operational reproducibility. And so by that I mean the idea of having a workflow that is optimized and scalable and easy to iterate on. And having that really reduces your need for a lot of institutional knowledge of how processes works, and it makes it very easy to kind of pick up your analysis and give it to different people, which is really great for a business or for research or kind of whatever you're trying to do. And so related, I would say reproducibility on the business perspective is kind of the idea of being able to make smart decisions using the power of hindsight. So if you are a business, a data-driven business, like we kind of call ourselves, it's sort of buzzwordy, we are making decisions based off of our data and based off of our analysis of the data. And if it's really hard to reproduce that analysis and you're making big like monetary business decisions based on that, you're kind of leaving a lot of money on the table if you can't reproduce that. So it's really important to have reproducibility from a business perspective as well. So I'm going to speak a little more to the operational reproducibility part. And so one of the things that I think we all struggle with a little bit is operational reproducibility, and I think one of the reasons behind it is because of like the traditional workflow for analysis. So traditionally, you kind of have different pieces of software to do different parts of your large data science lifecycle. So you might if you want to get some data and say your organization has databases, you might use Redshift to do all your data querying, and then you might pull that into Excel to do some like data cleaning and like maybe some exploratory graphs, and then like, oh, I want to build a model, so then you're going to go throw that to R, build a model, and then eventually your boss is like, I want a deliverable, so you're like, okay, I'm going to take all of that stuff from Redshift and Excel and R and put it into this PowerPoint, and somewhere along that process you make a valiant attempt to document what you're doing, so you do that in Word. And then you get to the very end, you deliver your results, and your boss is like, can you change that one thing? So now I gotta go all the way back in this long linear process and figure out exactly where you did the thing, and then how does that affect all the other pieces in your workflow. And while you're doing that, you documenting just becomes like a big pain, so you like kind of stop doing that, and then you give the answer, and then a month later, your boss is like, hey, can you do that thing again? And you're like, oh, I don't remember how I did that. So that is a traditional workflow. Now, an alternative workflow is the RMarkdown workflow. So when I think about the RMarkdown workflow, I think of it more of like spokes on a wheel. So instead of it being a linear process where each bit kind of depends on the other, it's sort of more like everything happens in one place, and when you change one thing, it can kind of naturally change all the other parts of your full data science lifecycle. So why RMarkdown? Sort of to summarize, all stages of the data science lifecycle, I keep saying that, are in one place. Documentation happens along the way. Super easy to automate. You guys probably have also heard a lot of this, like Mallory and Abhijit yesterday talked greatly to this, so I hope I don't sound like a broken record. But still, it's great. It simplifies collaboration. It reduces dependency on institutional knowledge, and you can have multiple different outputs with little pain, and so when you have all of those things together, you get reproducibility. So this might be a little elementary, but I would like to just kind of go through how to create a very easy RMarkdown to show you that it is so easy to do, and it takes very little kind of like skill and knowledge. You can kind of, if you know a few commands here and there, you can build your own RMarkdown, and maybe you can go back and start building RMarkdowns for your analysis if that's not something that you're doing already. So this is an example of an RMarkdown that I built for an analysis that I'm still in the middle of doing, where I'm trying to identify predictors for residential electricity usage. And so sort of like, are these demographic things? Like, what makes a person's electricity bill or electricity usage the way it is? So I'm doing this using the Energy Information Administration's residential energy consumption survey data. And I've gone through mostly the entire process. And so I don't really care about what I'm trying to show you. I kind of want to show you how I did it. So in this RMarkdown, you can see that it's really pretty. I like that. You can have the data that I'm using, you can show it, and Mallory showed this yesterday, where it's interactive and you click buttons and it's all there. You can embed graphs, which is really cool. All of the text where you're just describing things is all in that document. My personal favorite thing is the floating table of contents. When I discovered how to do this a month ago, I was like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing. And the other thing that I think is really cool is just like the numbering of sections. Like, there's ways to do this automatically. You might already know a lot of this. And then ggplot is my favorite. You can standardize that very easily. I don't know, you can do things like tabs, and you can see that like all parts of my analysis are all in one place. It's really nice, it's easy, and when I want to make a change, I can just make the change, click knit, and then the whole thing populates again. So it's great. So going into some specific features, how I did that. So first, formatting. So this, when you're creating an RMarkdown, this is what kind of the beginning looks like. You're going to give your title, your subtitle, if you have one, the author, that's me in this case. And you can define your document format. So there's the HTML document. I like using HTML documents a lot because it's really easy to do interactive stuff, and it's cool. But say if you want a PDF output or if you want a Word output, like you can do all of those things just by changing that one little thing that says HTML document. The floating table of contents is so easy. All you do is use the TOC command in your header, and you make that true, and then you get the table of contents. And then you can make a float on the side just by putting TOC_float equals true. So super, super easy, super cool. This number sections is in the table of contents on the side. You could see how those sections are numbered, and the cool thing about that, adding that thing, is that when you want to add sections or take away sections, the numbers will automatically update, which is just nice. Dynamic table displays are really easy. If you just put this dfprint equals paged command at the top, then every table that you print, you don't have to even use like the knitter cable, any of that stuff. It'll just come out in this nice format. So that's cool. And then finally, the document theme. You can put all these different themes. I like using the boot swatch themes. There's so many of them. I don't know if you've ever gone here, but there's a lot of really cool themes here. And I like to go in and you just put the name of the theme inside of your Markdown, and then you have your theme, and that's cool. And I learned a lot of this from RMarkdown, the Definitive Guide, which was by Yi Shi and JJ Allaire and Garrett Garlemund, and it was so easy to learn just by like reading this. So I highly encourage you to go look at it if it's something that if RMarkdown is something that's like scary and you haven't tried yet. Great resource. And then also Bootswatch themes are cool to play with. So when you're creating your RMarkdown, so there's all the formatting, you can make that nice, you can do all of the writing inside of it, and then you can also create your code chunks, and that's where this is really powerful. And creating a code chunk is super easy. You define them by these 3 backticks, and if you are going to do it in R, you can put R. If you're going to do Python, which I learned yesterday, apparently you can make that Python and then do Python inside of it, which is really cool. When I'm creating markdowns, I like to put all my libraries that I'm going to use in the analysis all inside of the setup chunk. And I do this so I can kind of keep track of all the libraries that I'm using at the end of my analysis. And oftentimes when I am doing analysis and I'm like, oh, I need to use this other library, I'll go all the way up to the setup chunk and stick that in there. You can set global chunk settings. And so doing that, settings are like echo equals false, and so if you set echo equal to false, then when you knit your markdown, you won't have your code output, but it will execute. So that's nice. And if you want to show your code, then you can make that true. So that's cool. And then another thing I like to do is standardize my ggplot theme, which you could use this as a standard theme. I like to mess with themes. I like to make things pretty. So if you use the theme set command at the very beginning and you set it to the theme, then all of your ggplots moving forward will be of that theme, so you won't have to like theme set in each plot, so that's great. And then lastly, in my setup chunk, I like to standardize my numerical output, so I like to make sure that there are no scientific figures and that my significant digits are limited, so I don't have big crazy numerical outputs. Text, I just want to show you how easy this is. Like what's on the right is what is on that side. The left is the code, and what's on the right is the output. And so when you put text, it goes straight into, it comes out exactly the way you write it, and it also shows up in your table of contents exactly the way you write it. So it's really easy, it's really dynamic. Embedding images is super easy. You just create a chunk and use the include graphics function from the knitter package, and it will output as the exact image that you hope for. And then also doing the simple things like making bulleted lists, like that's really easy, and it's very intuitive, so that's one of the reasons I really like the text part of Markdown. And then the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is the main code chunks. And so with the idea of having a really reproducible analysis in an organization, I would say it's a good idea to sort of like talk with your team about how you want to structure your code chunks. And so the nice thing about Markdown is that you can have both your back end and your front end kind of in the same place. So the main back end chunks that you would use is your database connection if you're doing that, or your data import, your query if you're doing a database, any sort of data cleaning. And then you also have all of the front end chunks with your exploratory data analysis, if you're like doing any sort of model, and then your results and session info. And I think it's good to just talk about this. Like, this seems really, really obvious. Like, this is how anyone would really do analysis. But I think like saying like this is the way we're going to do this, and kind of setting that in an organization is a really good way to make sure that you have the most optimal workflow. So if I do an analysis and I take my analysis and I go hand it to Max, for example, he can look at my Markdown and know where things are going to be and kind of how, and like know how to expect my analysis to flow. And I think that's a good thing to do. One thing I would really like to encourage you, if this is something that you use, if you use databases in your organization, connecting your database directly into your Markdown is really powerful, and it like truly makes your Markdown the most reproducible it can possibly be. So you eliminate, in addition to eliminating things like moving, like handing graphs and analysis in different places, you eliminate the need for handing over your initial data, which is really cool. You can just throw in your credentials. The library, the RODBC library allows you to do this. You can very easily use the driver connect function to connect your database. You can use the SQL tables function to list the tables in your database, and then you can query directly into inside of a chunk and output that into a data frame, and then just use that data for the rest of your Markdown, which I think is awesome. And then finally, on the front end, you guys already know this after listening to this whole conference. Like, you could do you can make these plots with ggplot or whatever you'd like and put it directly inside your Markdown. And I love this so much more than Excel or other point-and-click software, because when you want to make a quick change, it's so easy to do. And then lastly, the session info. This is a command that I like to put at the end of all of my Markdowns. It kind of just tells you all of the, like the operating system and all the packages and kind of all the things that happen in the background that you used to make sure you did your analysis, or that helped you do your analysis. And I think this is a good thing to do, just to kind of keep track of what you're using. And since so many people are making different types of packages, sometimes you lose track of what packages you're using. And so this is just like a good way to document that. So takeaways: climate change sucks. Renewables are great. I don't know, sign up for Arcadia Power. Prioritizing operational reproducibility will improve your organization. And I think if this isn't something that you're doing already, or this is something that you want to do, RMarkdown is a really great tool, and it really empowers you to be a better analyst. Thank you. Yesterday, I decided that the time was ripe to finally make a professional Twitter. So now I'm Data Danya. My first tweet had a typo in it, so I'm doing really great. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.